Hello there, happy holidays, and sorry this took a bit too long, but welcome to your game review. And this was, of course, a rather unfortunate ending to the game against a low-rated player, but hopefully we can learn something from it and come back stronger. So, in this game, we started with the English, and here against this specific move order, we have to understand that Black is taking a lot of liberties here, right? It's not like Black can just go and take the whole center with e5, f5 and expect not to be punished. So here White should probably open up the center, and the most critical move here, I believe, is d4. And here, if Black takes, then after queen d4 we have this very successful structure. This is the usual structure that we want. The d-pawn is exchanged for the e-pawn. Also, this f5 move is very weakening. And here, White will eventually put his knight on d5, which Black will usually not be able to tolerate. So he would either want to play c6 or take the knight. So if he ever takes, if he ever plays c6, then after the knight goes back, then the d6 square or pawn will become very weak and an easy target. So this is one trade-off. And if Black ever takes this knight with his own knight, we will usually take with the c-pawn and have this semi-open c-file with pressure on the pawn on c7. So this is kind of the whole strategic thing of this structure. So this would be very successful if Black takes. If he doesn't take, well, if e4, then this is already a bit too much. I think we can play f3, for example, try to already undermine Black's structure. Otherwise, we can also try to just develop bishop f4, h4, e3. Most importantly, not allow c6, d5 to consolidate. So at some point, if c6, for example, we can play d5. And White has a lot of space here. And finally, if d6, then this is also a very important line to understand. Here, White can go to this endgame, and usually this endgame is not very good, as if Black has enough time with c6, king c7, he will have enough time to develop the pieces, and he will be fine with his central pawn, which is why we must try and get some kind of initiative as quickly as possible. For example, bishop g5 check. If the king moves, we can go castles. If bishop e7, we can again castle. Black will have to block. Then we can continue knight f3 and try to create threats as quickly as possible. For example, knight c6, e4, threatening this pawn. And positionally, Black is in some trouble because his king is still in the center. So as long as we maintain the initiative, such positions are very good for White. So instead, White played e4, but this is a bit of a strange move, but I guess it's trying to get a Botvinnik setup. So, okay, d6, d3, so now we get this kind of Botvinnik type of position, knight g2, and castles. And yeah, the position is kind of dynamically equal, both sides have their ups and downs. And you mentioned you generally don't score well in positions where the opponent has the initiative. Well, no one scores well when their opponent has the initiative, right? As the initiative in itself is an advantage. So no one wants to have a position in which the opponent has the advantage, right? But this is simply one of the ways that chess is played, right? We played c4 on move 1, which means our aim is to play on the queen side, generally. So we should be prepared that the opponent will play on the king side, especially if he plays e5 and f5. And this whole queen e8, queen h5 thing, it's not like a forced checkmate, right? Of course, he will try to do this, but it doesn't mean that we have to panic and change the character of the position drastically. Here we can just castle, let's say queen e8. At some point we can take here because we want to open up this bishop. We don't want to allow Black at some point to play f4. And for example, after bishop e3, which looks like a move, d4 can be played. Well, maybe this is a bit annoying, but for example, d4 here already, Black really doesn't have time to just go and checkmate, right? And we can play similarly to the game, something like h3, bishop e3. At some point we can play f4 to increase the tension in the center, and both sides are doing kind of fine. Okay, d4. And then Black plays bishop e6, but this asks for d5, and d5 is played. Black takes, and yeah, this was a critical moment, and here this was something we had to understand. We have a lot of choices here. So when you played d5, maybe you thought if he takes, I will take back with the e-pawn or something else. And here, as you can see, there is quite a lot of choice. So this is a moment to think. And as you pointed out, the engine suggests taking here, which you did not consider, or even in analysis. So here, if we look for candidate moves, there's quite a bit. C takes d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, and there's 4 captures here. And we cannot kind of be biased towards one or another, right? We have to check all of them, at least superficially. We must see them. So this is kind of the point of the Forcing Moves book that you're studying. We must firstly see the first move, and only then we must calculate something further. And when you look at this, it starts to make a lot of sense, because now you're keeping the diagonal open for the bishop. We're getting the square on d5, the square on d6 is weak, and this would be quite a very, very, very successful kind of Sicilian type of position with the weakness here. And it doesn't take much to figure out that this is the right move, right? The hard part is to see the move. Okay, after this, we get this structure where black now has a 4-on-3 majority on the king side, while we have a 4-on-3 majority on the queen side. So if your aim was to stop the opponent's king side attack, this didn't really work out, as now the opponent's only goal will be to attack on the king side. He has nothing else to do. Okay, f4 is played, which is again a bit of a panicky move. There is no point in playing f4 weakening the king side so much. We have to understand our plan, which is b4, c5, and eventually try to create a passed pawn. This bishop is latently kind of helpful with c6. So there's no point in playing on the side where we are weak. For example, we can play castles. Black will have to develop. If he just goes queen e8, and here this doesn't really bother us too much. Knight g4, we can just play h3. And here after c5, for example, in d6, it's clear that white is the one having some kind of initiative. But after f4, now our king side is perpetually weak. Queen c7, b3, and knight a6, h3. Of course, we want to develop the bishop, but h3 stops knight g4. Maybe we should focus on castling as soon as possible, as this is one of the things in the opening. The sooner we castle, the generally more happy we will be. Black has some kind of resources here, for example, a check and knight g4. But this doesn't necessarily work because we can just take here. Of course, going here would not be very good. And after d6, we have quite enough resources. With knight d5, queen d5 to take b7, and black is not really in time to give some kind of fork. Okay, h3, and the bishop e3, so black played quite slowly, and it seems that he doesn't really understand the position. Black should be trying to play on the king side. For example, he can take here, let's say the bishop takes, knight h5, preparing g5, rook e8, and start to attack this king, which has been weakened. But rook a b8 is a bit strange. Bishop e3 now comes with tempo, and knight c5, and the castles. So here you were happy with white's position. Could have taken here as well. But yeah, white is somewhat better here because black isn't really doing anything on the king side, and white has finally finished his development. And now we can play on the queen side. So a6, rook c1, and yeah, this is a bit over preparation. As a general rule, if our plan is time sensitive, we should be trying to get it going as soon as possible. Also, if our plan is very easy to stop, we should also try to do it as soon as possible while we can. Because after this, the opponent can simply play e4, and our plan of creating a 4-on-2 majority here doesn't work anymore. And again, we have to understand the pawn structure. This is clearly where we have to play. We must create something on the queen side. There is no other plan here. So rook c1 or without rook c1, in either case, we are always taking here, right? And here after b4, this actually just kind of almost wins a piece. After knight c4, we can just take, play c5, and it's clear that white's pawn majority is faster than black's. So overall, this is our only plan, right? So we don't have to postpone it too much. Okay, rook c1 here, now b4, and after this, we finally get this position again, and after c5, it's clear that white is doing very well because his pawn majority of 4-on-2 is very advanced, while black's is only here, and it's not clear when he will advance. Bishop g5 is played, attacking the bishop, and queen b3. But this is a kind of gives up the initiative again. At this point, white could be the one having the initiative, if only he does not waste time. So at this point, we have to understand some things. Our bishop is attacked, right? This is kind of the problem that we're supposed to solve right now. And how do we solve this problem? Well, you decide to defend the bishop. The problem with a passive move such as queen b3, which simply defends a piece and does nothing else, is that we're giving up the move to our opponent. What's the difference with this? Well, now it is our move again. We have gotten rid of the problem. The opponent's knight is on g5, which isn't necessarily a good thing for him, but most importantly, it is our move. And this is kind of the point of the initiative. Now we're getting the move again. We can use it to our advantage. For example, d6. The queen will have to move again. It's our move again. h4. He has to move again. It's our move once more. We can even take the pawn here. And it seems that we are crashing through here. And all of this happened because we were the one getting the move on every turn. This is the initiative. We are making continuous threats, which means the opponent is not able to make his own plans work. After queen b3, a forcing move seems to be missed. Bishop a4. And now again we have to move away. Now bishop b5. And again we are getting attacked. Notice how it's the opponent creating threats. And at this point we are down on time. Bishop takes e4 is a very dangerous decision, because now our king will be weakened. After f takes e, we get this position, which is objectively kind of equal. Both sides have their ups and downs. Mostly white is trying to promote his queenside majority, but without so many pieces on the board, it will be a bit more difficult, because black has a lot of blockading squares on the light squares. So now that we have an opposite colored bishop situation, the priorities have changed. And now the priorities are king safety and initiative. As if one side is attacking and the other side is defending, the defending side will basically be a piece down, because the attacking side will be playing on light squares, while we will be playing on dark squares, which are not very useful. So this is the big problem. And at this point, black is better, because his king is safer than ours, which we have weakened quite a while ago. So now queen e3 was played, the bishop goes back, and d6. But unfortunately, now the pawns will easily be blockaded on the light squares, either by the queen or with the bishop, and we will never be able to push them any further. So instead we should have played c6 to push on the light squares. And now our threat is probably to go here and take on b7, creating an actual passed pawn. If he takes, we can probably take with the pawn. And now at least the opponent's queen is busy stopping our pawn. So instead d6, but now suddenly black is just winning. Also, this has lost time. We are getting attacked on h3. Also, our bishop is trapped. So at this point it's already lost. And after king h2, h6, the bishop is losing. So even if it goes to e7, it doesn't really matter, because the opponent is attacking us, and what we need is some light square control to get the c6 pawn going or something else. But this is impossible, because we only have a dark squared bishop. So this was quite an unfortunate ending, and black eventually won. So from this game, what we can gather is probably that if we have some kind of plan, which is easy to stop. For example, if our plan is to take here and continue pushing, if the opponent can just play e4 at any point, then we should probably avoid postponing this plan, and we should do it as quickly as possible. And later, in such positions like this, let's say, when it's clear that time is an important factor here, right? Both sides have their plans, and the faster we make our plans, the better it will be. So when time is a sensitive topic, we must play as much forcingly as possible. So here, if we can have a solution with this bishop, which is more forcing, not giving the opponent another move, we should do that. And now it's white to move again, and now we can think how we can continue with our own plan. So we must keep up the initiative. So hopefully this was useful, and see you next time.